Ed Gein, a name that has become synonymous with horror and depravity. The name sends shivers down your spine, evoking images of unspeakable acts. He was a simple farmer, lived in Plainfield, Wisconsin. To his neighbors, he seemed like an ordinary man, quiet and reserved. But beneath the surface, darkness lurked, a darkness that would soon reveal itself in the most horrifying ways. This is the story of a monster, a man whose actions would forever scar the small town of Plainfield. A story of murder, madness, and things too gruesome to imagine. His crimes were not just acts of violence, but of unimaginable horror. Gein's crimes shocked the world. The details of his actions were so grotesque that they seemed like something out of a nightmare. He wasn't just a killer. His depravity went far beyond that. He was a grave robber, a body snatcher. He would dig up graves and steal the bodies, using them for his macabre purposes. He made trophies from human skin and bones, lampshades, masks, and even a belt made of nipples. His house was filled with these gruesome artifacts, even a belt made of nipples. The sheer horror of his actions left an indelible mark on all who heard of them. His house of horrors became a spectacle. People came from far and wide to see the place where such atrocities had occurred, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can reside in the human heart. Ed Gein's story is a stark reminder of the potential for evil that lies within us all. Edward Theodore Gein was born in 1906. His childhood, far from idyllic. His father, George, was an alcoholic, a harsh man prone to violence. Augusta, Ed's mother, was a religious fanatic. She instilled fear of God and the outside world in her children. Ed was bullied at school, teased for his strange behavior and effeminate mannerisms. He found solace in his mother's twisted teachings. She filled his head with stories of sin and damnation. The seeds of darkness were sown. Augusta held an iron grip on Ed's life. Her influence was all-encompassing, reaching into every corner of his existence. She controlled his every thought and action, dictating his daily routines and even his innermost beliefs. Ed was not just her son. He was her creation, molded to fit her rigid worldview. Augusta believed all women, except her, were instruments of the devil. Her word was law, and her religious fervor was unyielding. She instilled in Ed a deep-seated fear of sin and a mistrust of the outside world. Ed, isolated and emotionally stunted, clung to her even tighter after his brother's death. The loss of his brother left a void that only Augusta could fill. Then, tragedy struck again. In 1940, George Gein died. This event further tightened Augusta's grip on Ed, as she became his sole source of emotional support. Just 4 years later, Augusta followed. Ed was devastated. He was alone, left to navigate a world he had been taught to fear and distrust. Lost in a world he never understood, Ed's isolation deepened. He wandered aimlessly, a solitary figure in a rural landscape that seemed to echo his inner turmoil. He sealed off the rooms his mother used, preserving them as shrines. These rooms became a sanctuary of sorts, a place where he could still feel her presence. His descent into madness had begun. The once orderly farmhouse fell into disrepair, mirroring Ed's deteriorating mental state. The boundaries between reality and his inner demons blurred, leading him down a dark and twisted path. Ed's loneliness grew. He sought solace in the most disturbing way imaginable. He began visiting graveyards, not to mourn, but to exhume. He dug up corpses, drawn to middle-aged women who reminded him of his mother. He took the bodies back to his farmhouse. There, in the macabre solitude, he skinned them. He fashioned masks, clothing, and furniture from their flesh and bones. The house became a grotesque museum of the dead. Section 5, the missing hardware store owner. Years passed. Ed continued his grisly activities unnoticed in his rural isolation. Then, in 1957, Bernice Warden vanished. Bernice owned the local hardware store. Her son Frank was the deputy sheriff. He suspected Ed. Frank remembered seeing Ed at the store the day Bernice disappeared. He went to the Gein farm to investigate. What he found shocked even the most hardened lawman. Section 6, Horrors Unveiled. The scene at the Gein farmhouse was like something out of a nightmare. The stench of death hung heavy in the air. Inside, a scene of unimaginable horror awaited. Bernice Warden's decapitated body hung upside down. Her insides were gutted, her torso emptied like a butchered animal. But that was just the beginning. Scattered throughout the house were bowls made from human skulls, chairs upholstered with human skin, a lampshade fashioned from a human face. The evidence of Gein's depravity was overwhelming. Section 7. Inside Ed's Mind. The nation was horrified. How could someone commit such atrocities? Psychiatrists and psychologists tried to understand the mind of Ed Gein. They diagnosed him with schizophrenia, a severe mental illness that can cause hallucinations and delusions. They believed his obsession with his mother, his inability to form normal relationships, and his twisted understanding of anatomy stemmed from his upbringing and his illness. He saw himself as a Frankenstein-like figure attempting to resurrect his mother using body parts. Section 8. The Making of a Monster. There was no single reason that explained Ed Gein's descent into madness. It was a perfect storm of factors: a domineering and abusive mother, a childhood filled with isolation and fear, an untreated mental illness that warped his perception of reality. His story serves as a chilling reminder that evil can fester in the most unexpected places, that sometimes the line between sanity and madness is thinner than we think. Section 9. Justice served. Ed Gein was deemed unfit to stand trial due to his mental state. He was committed to a mental institution. He spent the rest of his days confined, a prisoner of his own twisted mind. Some argued that he deserved a harsher punishment. Others felt his mental illness made him not fully responsible for his actions. His case sparked a debate about the insanity defense in criminal cases, a debate that continues to this day. Section 10. Ed Gein's Legacy of Fear. The horrors Ed Gein inflicted on his victims and their families were very real, but his story took on a life of its own. It seeped into our collective consciousness. It became a cautionary tale whispered around campfires, a source of nightmares for generations to come. His case inspired books, films, and music. His crimes, fictionalized and exaggerated, became a source of both fascination and revulsion. Section 11. Inspiration for horror. Horror, as a genre, has always drawn from the darkest corners of human experience, and few figures have cast a longer shadow over it than Ed Gein. Ed Gein's influence on popular culture is undeniable. His gruesome crimes in the 1950s shocked the world and left an indelible mark on the collective psyche. Gein's macabre legacy has inspired some of the most iconic characters and stories in horror cinema. The character of Norman Bates in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, inspired by Gein. Hitchcock's 1960 masterpiece delved into the disturbed mind of Bates, a character whose twisted relationship with his mother and penchant for murder were directly influenced by Gein's real-life horrors. The terrifying Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Gein again. Tobe Hooper's 1974 film introduced audiences to Leatherface, a chainsaw-wielding maniac who wore masks made of human skin, a chilling nod to Gein's gruesome practices. Even the Buffalo Bill character in The Silence of the Lambs owes a debt to the Butcher of Plainfield. Thomas Harris's novel and its subsequent film adaptation featured Buffalo Bill, a serial killer who skinned his victims, echoing Gein's horrific deeds. Gein's story, as horrifying as it is, continues to captivate our imaginations. His house, a veritable chamber of horrors, was filled with human remains, including skulls used as bowls and a suit made of human skin. These gruesome details have fueled countless nightmares and inspired a myriad of horror stories. It serves as a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most seemingly ordinary individuals. Gein was a quiet, unassuming man in a small town, yet his actions revealed a monstrous side that no one could have anticipated. A darkness that continues to inspire and terrify us to this day. The horror genre thrives on the fear of the unknown and the monstrous hidden within the mundane. Gein's story is a perfect embodiment of this fear, reminding us that true horror often lies not in the supernatural but in the human mind.